We had 10 SDRs at one point, and our opportunity creation per SDR was like dramatically lower than when we had like 3. And now we're back down to 2 SDRs who are feeding 7 account executives. And we have a really amazing inbound game because we have all this like crazy revenue operations and sales management and sales leadership content. And we have 2 SDRs who are generating as many opportunities as like 8 previously were.
That's Pete, the founder of Atrium. They've raised from funds like CRV, First Round, and Craft Ventures. How do you go from 10 SDRs to 2 and generate more business for your AEs?
In 2016, I started Modern Sales Pros community. At this point, it's like 35,000. And it's like this amazing community for like peer education. And so we just do a really good job of syndicating our content across that community. And when I say content, a lot of people think of like content marketing as kind of clickbait. You know, we have like a dozen master classes, many of which are variations of each other. This one's on setting and managing with goals. And this one's data-driven coaching, which also has goals in it, just like having lots of that very expert content available for folks and then just like broadcasting it as much as possible.
It's no surprise that having a great community with expert content is going to make an impact on your business, but how do you do that? Can you pay people to do that? Or does the founder need to actually generate the content?
Good SaaS is opinionated workflows. It's come from is like a good comprehension of what ought to be done, expertise. And so you kind of have to have that expertise in your organization. In our case, like I'm kind of like Grandpa RevOps here, who probably in the top 0.1% people who comprehend data-driven sales management. And so then as a result, the content kind of has to come from that person. Now they can partner with a product marketing manager or a marketer or what have you. Hey, partner with me, share my brain, I'll dictate to you, or we'll work together in order to create, and then like you're gonna then blow this up and make it get pretty and refine, and then we're gonna iterate it, and then I'll be the one who like presents it at SaaStr or what have you.
Enjoy it. Boom. Welcome to Sit Down Startup Founder Podcast. We interview the best founders in the world and ask them what they did in the early days, right before that hockey stick growth moment. I'm your host, Adam O'Donnell, a former founder. I live here in San Francisco and I now work for Zendesk for Startups. Zendesk is a customer support platform and we offer 6 months free to qualified product-oriented startups. This week's partner shout out goes to 2 great partners. First, Yext. They have a content management hub to help build consumer grade experiences. Check out their $35,000 offer in the show notes. And second, Forecaster. They make financial modeling easy for founders. Thank you. Check out their deal to get 20% off. Pete, it's incredible to have you on Sit Down Startup, Zendesk's founder podcast, and talking about your just experience growing Atrium. First, would you just kind of tell us what you do and how big the company is now as we get going?
Yeah, for sure. So Atrium makes what we call data-driven sales management software. So it's software that helps organizations embed a culture of data-driven sales management from top to bottom in their orgs. And the mechanism by which it does that is by helping sales managers use data to improve team performance. So the way that Atrium does that is it continuously monitors dozens of KPIs, like AE and SDR KPIs, and then proactively alerts managers and leaders and reps when something is off with the rep team, et cetera. And so what this does is it helps managers get to coaching insights faster. So they can change the behavior of that AE or that SDR or what have you in order to win. And so one of the cool things about this is that it takes about 2 minutes to set up a free account via a read-only connection to your Salesforce CRM.
Super easy. I want to dive into that. I'm sure that was a growth tactic, intentional. But how much money have you raised, or how big is the company now?
Yeah, so the organization is about 35 people, I want to say right now. I'd have to go look specifically. But so the organization's about 35 people or so. We're primarily based in San Francisco, but we also have some distributed teammates as well. And as you mentioned, we've raised a bit of venture capital. So we're initially funded by Charles River Ventures and First Round Capital. We then also work with Bonfire Ventures out of LA and Santa Barbara, and then most recently we raised the Series A from Craft Ventures here in San Francisco.
Congratulations. I know that's no small feat, and the numbers on Crunchbase are showing over 30 million. So really cool to see the traction that you've already have. The question that we've kind of readjusted recently is just, can you tell us about a time when you thought the business was going to fail? Basically just an authentic low moment to start us out here, because it's a tough time for a lot of founders out there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like, look, you're before you hit like $10 million in ARR, like if that's not happening quarterly, like you're probably like not doing your job right. And I think that that's just Ben Horowitz into the hard thing about hard things, calls it the WIFIO moment, reflect it's over, WFIO. Like, yeah, if you're not having that like at least quarterly, like you're probably not doing it right. And like the reality is that that's, yeah, like, so I can think of a variety of those, right? Like it could be in early 2020 when we were at like whatever it was, like, I don't know, a few $100,000 in ARR, with like good retention metrics. And like, we were like, all right, cool. We're going to like, we'll probably raise like a small series A coming in here, like the first half of 2020. And, we're getting ready for that fundraise, and it's like February, and like, there's some like weird stuff going on in China. It's unclear what's going on, et cetera. And then like, start taking initial meetings, and like take the first couple meetings in person, and then maybe take the next couple meetings like over Zoom. Normally we do this in person. And so like, I mean, that's an example, like, oh man, what the heck, right? And like all of a sudden nobody's buying anything for like 2 or 3 months, and then all of a sudden like everyone's buying everything, right? As like the money taps turn on. And so I think like, yeah, if you're not having like existential dread at like, at least quarterly, like you're probably not doing it right. And and like, it's just, and that's probably not going to stop until you get to like very serious exit velocity, which is like probably not 4 million in ARR, probably not 7, it's probably like 10, at which point you're like, all right, cool. Like we'd have to try very hard to like, to break this thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good word for founders out there that are in a difficult time. And there's always challenging seasons. I think it's easy to look back and be like, oh, 2021 was perfect, but it certainly wasn't, or parts of 2022 were as well. Like there's always challenging times. There are different types of challenges, but that's a great point.
Yeah. And I think, well, I mean, the 2021 thing is, I think the other thing too is like people thought that it was good, but I've been talking with like a lot of, my friends who are founders and like investors and what have you, but like also, like the threshold of product market fit really kind of like changes contingent on how expansionary and how loose budgets are. So I think a lot of founders potentially had like rainbows blown up their ear in late second half of 2020 and 2021, where it's just like, oh man, like look at our win rates and look at our like people like, wow, everyone's like, wow, people are buying from us, or et cetera, et cetera. And then you come up on those renewals in 2022, and we're having you really kind of see the difference between, okay, like, is this a critical must have, right? Or is this something that was like kind of speculative, and now all of a sudden that like interest rates are much higher and hurdle rates are higher, all of a sudden people are like, maybe we can do without that thing. So I think it's actually a the quote unquote hardness of like 2022 is actually very clarifying, because people maybe thought that they were further along than they were. And so like at the end of the day, the important thing is like making sure that people are getting utility out of your software. And what that means is like usage and verified business outcomes and things like that. And just just because people will give you money doesn't necessarily mean that you've gotten to product market fit. It has to be like, the old test of like, how disappointed would you be if you didn't have this in your life, if you weren't able to use this? And of course, like another way, like the more metrical way of looking at that is via usage and like business outcomes and what have you.
Absolutely, man. You're speaking our language here at Zendesk. This is not the reason that we do this podcast to just hit people over the head with the importance of customer experience, but it's funny how it just comes up in that growth story. So you're basically
totally.
just, yeah, you're just going back in the journey of, so like acquiring a customer, congratulations, but did they stay after a year? Okay, maybe even congratulations if it was an easy year, like where money's flowing, but even, the next year, are they continue to do that? How likely are they to stay? What's some of the strategies that you've used to be able to identify those business outcomes that were actually achieved to like feel good about your book of business?
Yeah, well, our director of customer success is this woman, Bridget Seacard, who's both very talented and also hilarious. And she has this like delightful turn of phrase where in Atrium's case, one of the cool things is because like we're this vertical analytics solution that's for very specific, like tactical data-driven sales management, you can see like the business outcomes in the software, right? So Bridget's joke associated with this is like good chart go up, bad chart go down, right? And so what we do there, like organizations come to us because they want to manage their business by metric, or they want to help their managers manage by metric. They want to like instill this this culture of data-driven sales management. And so what that means is like, oh, we have this pipeline hygiene problem as indicated by our reps have lots of untouched opportunities, right? And so subsequent to deploying Atrium, those untouched like the average number of untouched opportunities a rep like 30 days untouched opportunities that a rep might have, like, goes from 10 to 2 across like, 50 reps or what have you. Or, hey, we had to lay off like half of the SDR team, so our AEs have to be doing a lot more prospecting right now. Right. Subsequent to deploying Atrium, we like, historically the amount of like prospecting activity that account executives were doing on a weekly or monthly basis, and opportunity creation coming out of that might have been like here. And then subsequent to managing those metrics, hands-on, like now all of a sudden the AEs are prospecting 4 times as much and 5 times as much and doing a bunch. So it's kind of, and then the important thing is like those outcomes are good, right? Bad chart goes down, good chart goes up. But then what you have to do is document them and then record them, right? Like document, record them, and then make sure that the customer organization recognizes like, oh, like look at this utility that was captured here, that connects to like a business outcome, and then make sure that that's being consumed on a quarterly basis ahead of a renewal, et cetera.
I love that. It's like you can't just stop with what you're saying, like good chart goes up, bad chart goes down. You can't just like share that. And I had this experience. We were working on like a lead fund. We ended up pivoting a couple of times and trying to sell like basically better lead conversion for marketers, trying to get people to sign up for like white papers and stuff like that. And we could like prove that we were delivering a better ROI or a better conversion rate, but yet we still had a lot of people leave. And it was really perplexing to me because there were other forces that we hadn't put into account. And like, this is the right business metric according to us, who isn't actually your customer. So I love hearing like the details on that you've like kind of illuminated there. What's one of the things that you would have gone and done differently in your journey so far, knowing what you now know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing there is that like everyone should just be like there's a stepwise process for understanding that you're advancing against your business goals. And so just kind of like getting out of step too quickly is always kind of like the thing that you have to be careful about. And so a lot of organizations, that means like, hiring too many account executives too quickly. I think we had that a little bit of the first half of 2022, but like not too bad, right? It's not like we jumped, like, we have 7 account executives right now. It's not like that we jumped out to like 20 or 30 or what have you. It's just like, yeah, we maybe hired a little bit too quickly, and maybe we're a little loosey-goosey with the appropriate hiring profile there, and so on and so forth. But I think it's just kind of like, it's very difficult to like skip steps, and I think everyone is can really appreciate that right now, and I think we're not any sort of different there. And then using the opportunity for like a less expansionary environment to kind of get back to basics. Like I'll give you an example. Like we had 10 SDRs at one point, and our our opportunity creation per SDR was like dramatically lower than when we had like 3, and now we're back down to like 2 SDRs who are feeding 7 account executives. And like we have a really amazing inbound game because we have all this like crazy like revenue operations and sales management and sales leadership content that people really like. And we have like 2 SDRs who are generating as many opportunities as like 8 previously were, right? And so that'll really change the economics of your cost per SAO when 2 head count and the associated with salary expense are generating the same meeting count as 8 folks, right?
That is interesting. And that kind of goes into the next question, which is what's one of the most impactful growth strategies that you've used? It sounds like you just alluded on part of it, but I'd love to hear if you could tell us that.
Yeah, so I think the big thing that we have here at Atrium, that's a little bit of a superpower is we have in 2016 I started the modern sales pros community. So it's the nation's largest community of sales operations, sales management, sales leadership folks. And at this point, it's like 35,000 sales operations, sales leadership, sales management folks. You can just Google modern sales pros, and it's like this amazing community for like peer education. And so we just do a really good job of kind of like syndicating our content across that community. And so I think that like the mechanism, and when I say content, what I mean by that is like a lot of people think of like content marketing as kind of like clickbait and kind of like, listicles and things like that. And what we really are focused on is because we're pulling the sales management and sales leadership into this like post like management by metric world. A lot of that is like very heavy education. So it's lots and lots and lots of like master classes and webinars and just kind of like, as Nick Mehta likes to say, just kind of like repeating yourself until you're blue in the face, right? And so I think that we've done a pretty good job of that. Like if you go to our resource library on the Atrium website, we have like a dozen master classes, many of which are, like kind of variations of each other. Like this one's on setting and managing with goals, and this one's on data-driven like coaching or whatever, like which also has goals in it, right? And so like more focus on like the coaching behavior, you know, and but yeah, just like having lots of that very expert content out available for folks, and then just like broadcasting it as much as possible has been very powerful for us.
That takes a lot of time. Help me with what that team looks like. Who's actually managing it? How much are you involved in that?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really like have a team doing that. Like it's a lot of that is me, because I'm part of our like good SaaS is kind of like opinionated best practice workflows. And so where like opinionated best practice workflows come from is like a good comprehension of like what ought to be done, kind of like expertise. And so you kind of have to have that expertise in your organization, either through doing a bunch of good research and kind of like getting up to the tip of like the state of the art. And we certainly have that, right? So where in our case, like I'm kind of like grandpa RevOps here, who knows about, like is probably in the top 0.1% percentile of people who comprehend data-driven sales management, how to use metrics to measure and manage and improve teams and what have you. And so then as a result, like the content kind of has to come from that person, versus having kind of like, now they can partner with like a product marketing manager or a marketer or what have you, but then kind of like relying on somebody else, like, hey, like go make up some, that's probably a pretty tough thing to do, versus like, hey, partner with me, share my brain, I'll dictate to you, or like we'll work together in order to create, and then like you're gonna then glow this up and make it pretty and refine it, and then we're gonna iterate it, and then I'll be the one who like presents it at SaaStr or what have you. That's probably the more effective way of going about that.
That is really good. I think if you're not the one doing it, it's just going to get watered down and be like everything else. But because you're on the cutting edge yourself, you're just documenting those experiences to help bring people up to where you already are. And what percentage of your time are you spending on that?
I think the way that we do it is like, we like, as you have more and more of this content, you kind of like remix the slides together, so it kind of becomes less challenging. But I probably do like 2 or 3 events a week, and then our marketing team, like they're setting it up, like doing the promotion, doing the lead, like doing the registration capture, all that sort of stuff, and then I have to show up and do the presentation or what have you, and then sometimes it's like recorded, and it's like, here's Pete giving this presentation, but it's actually Pete like a month ago doing the presentation. But the point is that like that can be very effective, because at any given point in time, somebody may have a different problem than they had previously, And so like, whereas 3 months ago, I really didn't care about like setting and managing with goals, but now all of a sudden I've gotten to the point where I have 10 account executives instead of 5. And now I really need to think about like setting consistent goals across the entire team. Or, previous, like all last year as a VP of revenue operations, I was, mired in deploying a CPQ system. And now the big initiative for this year is making sure that our managers have a consistent sales management motion and like, a good operating rhythm tied with the like associated metrical assets. And like now I'm really focused on that because it's an initiative for me. And like, oh, cool. Now I'm going to consume this content and oh, great. Atrium seems like a great way of doing that. I'm so glad that I consume this content,
That's so good. Well, this has been amazing. The last question is, what did you want to be when you grew up? If you haven't already grown up yet.
Shoot, man, I don't think I don't know if I know about that. Like so long ago, so long ago in a galaxy far, far away. But I think like when I was in college, I think I really kind of got the like entrepreneurship bug because and mainly because like there's really nothing better than seeing a problem, conceiving of a solution, being able to test that solution very rapidly. And so, being an entrepreneur, being a founder is a great way of doing that. But even like within an organization, like one of the things I like to say to our sales team is that we are like the product managers like of our sales organization. And so, just that loop of like identifying a problem, tackling it, like, forming a hypothesis, seeing whether or not it hit, and then like looping back again to the next problem. Or if you didn't solve the problem, like, continue to honey badger it is part and parcel of how we, make people like solve problems. And so whether that's like doing it with a company or like doing it in your individual role, I think that's really rewarding.
Man, I love that. It's just the ultimate like Lego playground of things that you can work on is what I'm hearing. So this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, you bet, man. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you want to learn more about Zendesk for startups, check out our website, zendesk.com/startups. Also, we're always looking to improve, so don't hesitate to email me with any feedback on how we can ask better questions, guests to target, or anything else so we can do to better help you as a founder. My email is adam.o'donnell@zendesk.com.